did.
But because
I'm
you
glad
had
that I
it,
did.
you did it?
Yes. So right now that's why I'm walking funny, because I got a penicillin shot in my ass.
Is that what you call them?
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dad Mods. Today we're going to hit you with another one of our little tech tip videos. So what we're doing, help if we were showing the people what we're doing. This is tipped over. So what we have are 1950 Ford gauges. This is out of our Shoebox build series. So if you want to see more details on that build, go ahead and click the doodad and go to the page and do the stuff and go to the videos, because we've got some really good stuff we've done. S10 clip on the front of it, some cool tail light things.
Some other wiring already.
Yeah.
All sorts of fun stuff.
Motor swap. Yep.
Yeah.
So we don't see a whole lot of videos out there specifically about how to update your gauges, so that's what we're doing today. We are going to take the vintage gauges and all of their filthy, dirty, very dim lit glory, and we are going to update them, make them work with 12 volts. So thanks for tuning in. Let's grab some screwdrivers and start opening it up.
Break her down.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the factory gauges. This is out of a 1950 Ford Custom Coupe, Custom Deluxe. They're all the same thing. And what it is, these come from a 6 volt system from the factory. The cars were 6 volt. On mine, it is a positive ground, which sounds a little bit like an oxymoron, but that's how these old cars work. Literally, the ground was actually the positive side of the battery. So what we're doing is we're updating this to 12 volts with a negative ground. So it takes a little bit of changing things on the back side of it, but it's still kind of a similar principle. A few other little details that we're going to be doing here. In order to make it work, you have to reduce the voltage. So we have voltage reducers we're going to wire in. There are other versions that you can use. They call them like the runts style, R-U-N-T-Z. You can order those through Shoebox Central. I wanted to try these out. These I got from Amazon. We can throw a link in the description if you want to try those out. And we are updating the lighting inside of it as well, because the original ones are 6 volt and those will burn out very fast if you put 12 volts to them. I think the one bulb that we had, and God knows how old that thing is, burned out after having it turned on for like all of 2 seconds. So there's a few other little details, like there is actually a little domed piece of plastic, or it's like translucent, that the bulb actually plugs into, and then the dome covers that. And they say that it has some kind of a like glowing effect and it lights up the numbers better. Donnie and I have tested it, it didn't seem like it. And even when I was driving this thing at night when it was 6 volts, I could barely see the gauges, so I don't know. We're ditching that. I think we're going to remove these and then control the brightness through like a rheostat or the actual headlight switch itself. So depending on your application, you probably have one of those. If not, you can get a adjuster for incandescents as well as LEDs. So that's all the details. Let's start by disassembling. Very first thing that we're going to do is a deep clean on these, because it for sure has 70 years worth of schmutz in it. So all you need is, what do we got, Donnie? 3/8. You need a 3/8 socket to remove the actual gauges, the wiring on the back side of them, and then a flathead screwdriver. The lights themselves are just very simple plug-in style. Just push in. So super simple. Pop those guys out, and we'll show you in a little bit how we went about rewiring them to have nice, clean, updated, properly shielded wire, unlike the old, and I'm sure yours look the same, tore up, nasty bulbs, nasty wiring shielding. So, right, let's start taking her apart. So we are going to start with marking the ground side. Okay. And then we will pop the wires off. Goofy. There we are. You can't even see the numbers of how many miles on it. That's how grody this thing is. Yeah. Let's see just how gross she's gotten. Gross. All right, so we got this portion of it pretty well cleaned up inside. Just using water and a paper towel worked okay. We're gonna try the last step will be cleaning it up with a glass cleaner. We'll also have to use something to try and strip some of this overspray paint off. That's a long story with a previous owner. But I think what we're going to try out, because the faces of some of these gauges, just water and paper towel isn't quite cutting it. One of the contributors of our show is actually a brand called Super Clean, which you'll find these guys in a lot of big stores like Walmart. I want to say you can find them at Menards. I think they're at Home Depot. They're kind of everywhere. They're a pretty massive brand. Well, they're a contributor of the show. And we're pretty stoked about that because, you know, their products work pretty amazing. So we're going to try cleaning off the face of this with just a little bit of this solution. It's a biodegradable like grease cleaner, grease cutter, degreaser, that's the word. So hopefully that'll work to get this little bit off because it does look like it's kind of greasy. So we'll just kind of spray a little bit on the paper towel here. We do also have their glass cleaner, which we're going to use on the on all of the glass on here. Well, it is working on that white. for sure. Crazy how much gunk gets in these things. God, that's so much better. All right, now that we've got this thing pretty well cleaned up, experimenting with light bulbs to decide what we're gonna do with turn signals and stuff. So these things have this weird diffuser in them. Supposedly what this is for is it emits like almost like black lights, a blacklight type effect, because apparently there's some kind of paint that's used on the numbers in here that causes them to like light up, kind of like fluorescent yellow marker does with a black light. Obviously it probably didn't work to that extreme, because when you put a black light on something, it pops. So anyway, I don't think that works a whole lot anymore. We've tested this out, we've put different lights behind it, and barely any lights getting through. So, and certainly none of these numbers were lighting up anything special. So we're gonna pop out these diffusers. That way, we've got the straight bulb going in, and it's going to emit the maximum amount of light in there. Now, when all of these bulbs are in there, it might be super bright. And what we'll do, at least in this application, we've done the full 12 volt swap on this thing using a Speedway harness as well as a Speedway column. And all of those components work together so that you have a dimmer built into it that just like plugs right in. So depending if you've got a headlight switch that has a dimmer effect in it as well, you can wire these up to that. They might already be wired up to it. And then you can dim the lights. So that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna kind of control this by dimming the actual bulbs themselves. That should handle how intense this is. But we have turn signals that are gonna be going in here. And those turn signals go in these areas. We're getting LEDs for those because we bought LEDs that are pretty directional and they're really bright and they're about the size of these. It's going to put the bulb close to the actual turn signal arrows, and that's going to overpower any of the other light that's coming through around it. So you're going to have a very obvious view of a blinking turn signal. So you're not going to really be able to miss it. And that's obviously the purpose of it, is to just blink and inform you that your turn signal is on. I think we're going to finish popping these guys out, and then we're going to assemble the gauges again, and then we'll show you guys how we went about rewiring these sockets and which bulbs we're using for it. So you might stab yourself. Just a warning.
Makes for a good video, though.
Yeah, because you've got to get a screwdriver under here.
Let me be Quentin Tarantino for about 5 minutes.
There we go. Once you get one of these tangs bent in, then the rest will just kind of fall. Kind of. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. There we go. So, there we go. Probably doesn't help how filthy they've gotten. Looks a little better. Yeah. Okay, now that we've got those pried out, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to rewire these sockets. So a couple of these have already been rewired, and I think a pair of them are actually new. Newish, because they've got more traditional wiring attached to them. And these guys were in the turn signal section, turn signal pockets on this thing. So what I've done is I've gone about rewiring one of these already. Very simple, so this is what's working for me. The biggest thing is to keep everything shielded, but what I do is I am disassembling them. And in most cases, the contact is still in really good shape. And this wire is actually like really heavy wire. So I've actually been soldering to the existing wire. So what I do is I strip back all of the shielding, leave myself just enough of a lead that I can attach some modern wire to, some modern copper wire, and then I'll solder to that, and then I will shrink tube onto that as well. So you use all the original components and a tiny bit of the wire, but you're eliminating this old, decrepit shielding that's on it. You can see most of them are actually splitting apart. So those are not going to be safe enough to continue using. It's kind of amazing that they worked in the first place. So rather than trying to locate a bunch of new sockets, we're going to just go about doing it this way. So I'll show you guys how exactly I'm going to do that right now. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to link these all together. So we're going to start with the with the regular lead on the end of it, and that's going to start at the left side, right side if you're looking at the front of the gauges. You can do this in whatever orientation you want, but and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to link them all together because these are all in the same circuit. This is just the lighting circuit for these single bulbs that are going in. So figure out your loop size. That's about mine. Bit more. Attach these first. Then you just want to double check if that's going to work. Yep, it's a decent lead. Now, because we're soldering everything together, you need to have all the connection, all the pieces of it figured out here first. So remember, you've got to run this in through the back, run the wires in through the back of this. And then you're going to connect the wires. And solder it. And we'll just repeat this process. Alright guys, so we've got the lighting figured out. We've got indicator bulbs that we're going to move on to here in a moment. We also kind of got to plan out how we're going about wiring all of the different circuits here. So we've got quite a few things going on, and when you convert these over to 12 volts, you need reducers to power all of the sensors, sensor gauges. These cannot handle 12 volts. So what you do is you pick up voltage reducers. So in this case, we've got these Drock brand, get them on Amazon, reducers. You can also get the Runt style, which is like, it's a simpler looking, almost kind of looks like a blade fuse, or not a blade fuse, kind of like an, it's like a large blade fuse. Let's see if I've got one handy. They almost look like one of these style of fuses. But yeah, what they do is they just reduce voltage. So, in this case, I picked these guys up. They're pretty simple, pretty cheap. I think they're under $10 a piece. So, check the link. There's a link that's going to be in the description to purchase these. And what I'm going to do is all of these are going to be located elsewhere. They're not actually going to be on the gauges. They're going to be like, I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to put it, but I'm going to build a plate that'll hold all of those and that'll sit somewhere else. But I want to clean up all the wires that are going to run to the gauges here, and I want the gauge itself to have plugs on it so that you can just simply remove it without leaving a bunch of like, a bunch of the bulbs like hanging or something like that. So what I'm going to be doing is putting everything in with weather pack connectors. So I don't have one nice like 16 pin or 12 pin, whatever this is going to end up being, connectors. So I got to use a bunch of what I have, and in this case I've got enough 3 pins, but I've got one 4 pin. So what I'm going to do is the gauges are going to have a pair of 3 pins, and the reason for that is the 12 volt side is actually a 6 volt side. You need a voltage reduction for powering up these gauges. They can't handle 6 volt because they come off of a 6 volt car. So what you got is we've got a 6 volt reducer, meaning that this takes a 12 volts power supply in, reduces it to 6 volts on the other side, and each one of these gauges needs its own reducer. So right there we know that we've got 3 connections to these gauges. We've got 3 gauges. So we're going to have 3 leads coming into one of these plugs. So that right there, that takes care of one of our 3-pin connectors. The other side is the signal wire from the sensor. So we've got 3 of those, so 3-pin connector. Then we've got our lighting circuit, and then we've got our turn signal indicators. And then we really need to run a ground right to the housing itself. That's kind of best practice. Your dash itself might produce a ground signal, might have continuity with the rest of the chassis. But in this case, I want to have a dedicated ground signal. And this harness actually has a dedicated ground right in it that is intended to run to the gauges. From what I've gathered from it, that's assuming that you've got a more modern gauge setup where you don't necessarily have the type that grounds straight to the housing itself like we do. So what I'll do is I'll just run that ground wire right to one of these screws, and that will provide the ground signal, because these housings, basically I can explain this a little better. So the lead coming off is your 12 volts, and the housing is actually the ground. So if you look at a bulb itself, the little nub on the bottom is actually your 12 volts, or in this case, these are 6 volt. And then you look at the sort of the shell of it, the body of it, and that's actually your contact for your ground. So pretty simple concept. So we'll just run a ground straight to it. But anyway, so that's 4 wires. So we've got a 4-wire connector. You might not have access to weather pack connectors. You might not feel comfortable using something like that because you have to do crimping and plugging all of it. And it's simple. You can buy a kit from Amazon or wherever. So there are options that you can go to O'Reilly's, kind of like what we did with the turn signals on this thing. You can get they call them Builder Series wiring pigtails from Dorman, and then it's just a matter of connecting to the existing wires on them. So I keep those as backup, and I'm glad that I did, because I'm all out of weather pack 2 pins, and those are actually weather packs with leads already on them. So anyway, here we go. We'll just get cracking with this, start building our harnesses. So let's do this. Now, if you are restoring your gauges and maintaining your 6 volts, you can actually jumper all of these. You can jumper them in the same way that we did with the lights. But if you're converting it to 12 volts, you're going to need a voltage reducer. If you use the runt style, I've seen people do the voltage reducers right off of these studs. So they're all going to kind of run in a similar fashion together. Alright guys, so here's all of our connections. We've got our lights right here, runs up into the 4-pin. We've got our 2 turn signals that run to the 4-pin, and we've got our ground. Ground is right there. As for the other 3 pins, we've got, this is the oil sender, fuel level, and the water temp. Those run to a 3-pin. Then for the other side, which is the 6-volt signal or 6-volt input, that all runs into this 3-pin. So the beauty of it is all the red wires are all 12-volt wires, with the exception of the turn signals, which use the same wire colors as the chassis side. So that'll make it really easy for making sure I pin this thing correctly. All of the 6 volts are red, same they will be on the car side, or rather the reducer side. So these guys, and then these are the same wire colors as the senders, the like oil pressure and water temp and all that stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all of them. The one that I haven't touched on is the oil dummy light, and I've got to decide how I want to take care of that, but that's an incredibly simple thing. That is also just a single 12-volt input. I'll figure that out a little bit later on. I'm not sure that we actually have a wire for that in this harness, so I may have to add it. But that's simple enough if you guys follow what we've done with all the other lights. One more indicator is the same exact thing. Okay guys, so gauges turned out awesome. They look great. We tested them out. They look beautiful. Really excited. The turn signals are super bright. They're actually too bright, so I'm going to have to try and get some kind of a little cover for those. I know you can get them. So I'll have to do something to dim down those lights if they're straight on to me. So that'll be the first step. We'll see how blinding it is. But yeah, looks pretty awesome. So let's talk about our voltage reducers, because this is the next step, followed by the final wiring, car side wiring. So we've got Drock brand voltage reducers. These guys take a 12-volt in, ground in, and they deliver a 6-volt out and a ground out. The ground, I don't know that it's really necessary. When we tested it, we didn't use it for anything, so I'm going to guess it's just a pass-through ground. So if this is intended to be in, you know, if it's like in the wiring in line to go to something, they probably figure like the ground going out will go to that component, whatever it is. In our case, we're not going to need to worry about that because the ground is actually the gauge side, the sensor side. So all we really need is the 6 volts coming out. The way that we're going to make this work, we've got 3 gauges, 3 voltage reducers, and these are going to be mounted elsewhere with leads running to that 3-pin plug that's then going to deliver the 6 volts to each one of the corresponding gauges. The reason why this is so important is the ratings on these. They say that these are only rated for 3 amps. I don't know what's actually being drawn for a gauge. So everything that I've read says that you need a voltage reducer for each one of them. So that's what we're doing. I got a piece of aluminum plate that I'm going to clean up and shape and fit somewhere underneath the car. I'm thinking it might go off of the brake pedal bracket, the large bracket that has the hanging pedal, because it's a nice kind of open spot, so it'll have air movement around it, and it shouldn't have any issues with you know, being in the way of anything. Go. It's definitely a little ugly, but I'll either relocate it up a little bit higher or I'll build some kind of a shield for all of that just to cover it, make it look a little cleaner under here. But there we go. That's her installed. Now we're going to get it plugged in and then organize the wires. Not bad.